Good evening. Looks like we are going to be up and running here soon, just making sure everything is good to go. And then we're going to jump in. First video, as you can see on the screen, is going to be with Megyn Kelly and Piers Morgan, maybe the two most attention-hungry people on the internet. I mean, that's a reach because everyone is kind of attention-hungry on the internet, but those might be the most, just based on their views and how they just flow with the wind and have no values. But anyways, it's all good. We're going to check it out and see how it goes. So looks like we're good to go on the stream. So let's jump in. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Mashbitz. Welcome to the stream, and let's jump in.
I've got to ask you about what your former place of employment, CNN, is doing to keep up with the Piers Morgans of the world. Piers, they are jealous of your numbers and possibly my own. It's incredible what they are doing. They've decided that if they try to make Jake Tapper and Anderson Cooper and their sets look more like they are podcasters and in digital media, people will start listening to them again. They've got Anderson Cooper. They told him, take off your jacket and roll up your shirt sleeves. They got him the big microphone that was like Edward R. Murrow style, or that you'd see on a podcasting set. Jake Tapper literally did his show from his office with his panels squeezed in on his little couch because he says that's where they do their actual journalism from, Piers. So they're getting more authentic, they think. And you say what about this desperate ploy to save their ratings?
Well, I think flattery is the most impressive.
I mean, I think it's kind of funny, though, to be honest. Like, I have a podcast. It's called Something for Everybody, and really the only reason people have these type of microphones is because Joe Rogan did it, and Joe Rogan made it famous, and so now every podcast needs it. You don't need it. Like, if you go on Lewis Howe's podcast, like, he just has the mic that clips here, and some other shows have the one that clips here. But Joe Rogan made the podcast in front of you famous. So now, if you think you want to relate as a podcaster, you have to have that setup. But CNN is doing whatever they can. Anyone is doing anything they can to get views and ratings in this attention and interest economy. So it's kind of cringe, but it makes sense.
Thing you can have. Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. Having just done 7 weeks of filming my show from my sitting room at home because I managed to fall over and break my femur and need a new hip. You and I know, and I watch your show very regularly, and often you're in different locations. It doesn't matter where you are because you can create exactly the same show from wherever you are in the world. And I'm the same. I've been all over the world doing my show from all sorts of different locations. That's the beauty of the nimbleness of what we now do. And we know that our viewers thoroughly embrace that. But the difference is we're not mainstream media, and they've been very sniffy about all of us and saying, oh, look at these podcasters, no one really cares about them. There's a whole campaign going on now about no one, they're all irrelevant, these podcasters and YouTubers, no one cares. And I'm like, I've got 4 kids from 32 down to 14. None of them watch mainstream television at all. They all watch YouTube. They all watch my show, your show. They watch Tucker. They watch Candace. They watch all these shows. Increasingly, interestingly, they're not watching Ben Shapiro, for example. I saw the numbers came out a few days ago about the dramatic shift downwards in his YouTube numbers. I'm not surprised because he's gone from Ben Shapiro, the king of free speech, to Ben Shapiro, the guy that says, if you say anything critical about Israel, you must be anti-Semitic and we must cancel you. The hypocrisy is real.
He hasn't said that one time. These people are so cringe, Piers and Megyn Kelly, that they'll just conflate so many different ideas. Ben Shapiro criticizes them for sure, but he's never asked for anyone to be canceled, and that's a totally mischaracterization of his ideas. Anyway, so let's continue.
But when I see someone like Anderson Cooper, I have to say, in my experience of working with him, and I use that phrase advisedly because he was such a poisonous little backstabber when I worked there, watching him rolling his sleeves up with his big old microphone, trying to be Edward Morrow was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I mean, at least with Jake Tapper. I found Jake Tapper's office mesmerizing. He's got so much cool stuff in there. But really, Anderson Cooper, the new Ed Morrow, do me a favor.
I know.
It's just completely toe curling. But like I said, imitation is the best form of flattery. They are trying to look like us, but they don't. I mean, Anderson Cooper never expresses an opinion worth listening to anyway. But that's why people turn to us. They know what's happening in the news. They want to know what to think about what's happening in the news. And we tell them, we give them strident, honest opinion. Take it or leave it, but at least no one is controlling us. We're our own bosses. We say what we believe in the moment. We're not afraid to change our views if facts change.
Actually, someone is controlling the both of you, Piers and Megyn Kelly, and that's views, and that's attention. Megyn Kelly will change with the win. Piers Morgan, you'll change with every guest that comes on your show. And you guys are just attention and clickbait whores. So someone is controlling you. I don't know if it's money or a person behind the scenes, kind of like Tucker Carlson, but what does control you is attention. And you have to have the views. And the first thing Megyn Kelly mentions in this short clip is the views. She has to have the views. That is the most important thing for her, not the truth, not facts, not a nuanced approach, just views.
We are unencumbered spirits. They cannot say the same. They're still living the old mainstream media television rules, and they are like a straitjacket, as you and I discovered. So look, on one level, I've got some great friends at CNN. So actually, I've always got on very well with Jake. I get on very well with people like Caitlin Collins and Wolf Blitzer and Aaron Burnett and others. I've got no issues with a lot of my colleagues there, but I do think they've got an existential problem, CNN, about what they are going to try to do going forward, because the average age of a CNN viewer is nearly 70. 70. The average age of my viewers and your viewers is about 45. And the reason young people gravitate to us is we look quite cool to them. We're not sitting in,
conventional
mainstream media locations, preaching a kind of mainstream media.
It's not the set. It's the person and the messaging. And to your point, like, my audience disagrees with me all the time. A lot of them are supportive of this war. That doesn't mean that they leave. They're interested in hearing ideas kicked around, honestly, by somebody who overall they trust. The problem for CNN is they sacrificed that long ago, and it's going to take more than a set design to get it back. By the way, on the subject of Ben Shapiro, who I know attacked you for absolutely no reason and just doubled down, he's lost 150,000 subscribers over the past year, 150,000 at least. There's a real reason to believe that he may be paying for subscribers and views. Many who study the industry believe that. But I want to show you one thing quickly. He's not only trying to force you into saying what he wants you to say around Israel and this war, et cetera, and me too. He tried it with Michael Knowles, his own colleague over there, where they were having a discussion. Like a BLMer, he tried to make him say what he wanted him to say. Here's the example in SOT 9.
Well, Michael, I'll just ask you straight up. Is Candace Owens doing something evil by attacking Erica Kirk?
I think that it's wrong to attack Erica Kirk.
Well, say the sentence with her name in it.
I'm not going to dance like a puppet for the podcast.
You don't have to dance like a puppet, but you are dancing pretty quickly. I mean, there's a lot of tap dancing.
I don't think there's any tap dancing.
Even if you aren't interested in the podcast, where's the podcast?
And I think the people who are leading the invective against Candace are her biggest publicists.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it, just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
Make him say it. BLM, say it. That's what Ben Shapiro has become, Piers.
Yeah, it's like he's all for free speech, as long as it's exactly how he tells you.
That's not an attack on free speech. He knows what Michael Knowles thinks about Candace Owens. He knows that attacking Erica Kirk is wrong, and he wants him to say it. That's not an attack on free speech. Like, what video did you watch where there's an attack on free speech? He's asking direct questions, and they're just making shit up at this point.
You need to speak, and I'm not having it. You're not having it. That's why our numbers are going through the roof as more and more people tune in. That's why he's losing his audience. And credit to Michael Knowles, who came on my show last week and was great, as he always is. We don't always agree about everything, but he's always a civilized debater. He's always an interesting guy. He's always well-informed. He's very intelligent. And he just wasn't going to be browbeaten by Ben Shapiro into saying what Ben Shapiro wanted him to say. And you can have all sorts of views about Candace. I have Candace on all the time. We lock horns about all sorts of things. I don't particularly like the way she's gone after Erica Kirk. I don't agree with her about Bridget Macron being a man.
If Ben Shapiro really wanted to squash Michael Knowles' free speech, he would have just fired him on the spot. And also, I think the Daily Wire is worth like $1 billion. They have like 1 million subscribers, paid subscribers on the Daily Wire. And also losing 150,000 subscribers on your YouTube channel for a channel that has over 4 or 5 million subscribers is extremely normal. So, yeah.
Whatever it is. But Candice is a very dynamic and popular person in this space. She has strong opinions.
Dynamic is a really nice word to say that she's a pathological liar, but cool, man. Cool.
Strong views, and I like arguing with her, just as I do with you when we had our tear up about Bad Bunny. 42 million people watched one of those clips of me and you going at it about Bad Bunny on our TikTok channel. But Anderson Cooper can roll his sleeves up and take all his clothes off. He's not going to get numbers like that.
A pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much. I agree with everything you just said. We'll talk again soon.
Great to see you. Take care.
Yo, but we care about the facts. We care about the facts, but we got 42 million views. We care about the story. We care about the truth. We care about the truth. But most importantly, no matter what, we got 42 million views. I mean, what do you really care about? It's obvious. It's obvious. What is she going to say? Are we done with this video?
Piers Morgan, the one and only, one of my inspos for getting into this space to begin with. He wasn't yet in this space when I got in this space, but his no nonsense, honest approach to the news.
All right, that's enough. We don't need any more of that. Thanks, Megyn Kelly and old Piers Morgan for being exactly who we know you to be. Just clickbait whores, all for the views, not for the truth, not for the facts. Gonna say random shit about free speech when that's not what Ben Shapiro is doing, and you're just using it. You're just saying that stuff so you know that you can clip it out and put it in a YouTube thumbnail and YouTube title that you called out Ben Shapiro because he's on a war against free speech, and it's just not accurate. And then all you talk about is the views, even though you claim to be morally virtuous about the truth. It's a fucking ridiculous thing. Anyways, let's go now to like an hour-long conversation between Coleman Hughes and Sam Harris on Iran and Tucker Carlson and all these types of things. So we'll just watch that for the next hour together. I'll drop my commentary in between if I have anything to say, but really, I love Coleman Hughes. I think Sam Harris is great as well. And so really, I'm just watching this because I was going to watch it anyways. Might as well watch it in real time with you guys here. And if I have anything of value to add, I will. If I don't have anything of value to add, then I certainly will not. So let's jump in. Let's share and let's jump in.
I've been doing a few podcasts about it here, hosted a debate that turned into not really a debate between Neil Ferguson and Richard Haas. I'm curious, I know you have mixed feelings about it because the project you feel is worthy, but the people carrying it out you feel are incompetent. So tell me how you're thinking about the war in Iran right now.
Yeah, well, so I guess start with the first claim that the project is worthy. That's not a claim that specifically checks all the boxes that I think many listeners would want checked in order to agree with the claim, right? So, am I claiming that I know that Iran posed a so-called imminent threat to America? No, I'm not claiming that. I mean, when I say this is a worthy project, I'm saying this was worthy at any point in the last 47 years, right? We've been at odds with Iran, and Iran has been at odds with the human rights of its own people, and it has been a terror state, and it has exported terrorism to the world, and it has killed Americans in various contexts, from our misguided, you might think, war in Iraq, to the 1983 bombing in Beirut and other terrorist atrocities the world over. It's funded Hezbollah. This has been a bad actor for nearly as long as I've been alive, and importantly, it has been a source of utter misery for all the Iranians who don't want to live under theocracy, right? Which I am convinced is a majority. So certainly, if you talk to anyone in the diaspora, you will hear to a man and woman that it is a majority, and they will make that claim of the people who are still living in Iran. So whether it's 20% of the Iranians who support the regime, or 10%, or I was speaking to a Persian last night who thought that those figures were vastly inflated, and he thought it was more like 1%. something like 1 million people of the 90 million Iranians that could be brought into the streets and on any given day to claim that they would support the regime because they are in fact, proper Shiite religious fanatics who really do support the regime and are, willing to die for it. Okay, so there's 1 million of those people who I'm not talking about in Iran, say, but Iran, unlike Iraq and Afghanistan, where we perhaps learn the wrong lessons from our meddling in the Middle East, is a society that I think is the majority of its inhabitants, I think, are truly sick of theocracy. They're far more sophisticated and educated and aspiring to live secular lives than the people of Afghanistan, certainly, and I would say even the people of Iraq. So I think I don't think at any point, I don't think we could have concluded from how awful our meddling in Afghanistan and Iraq turned out to be, and again, even those two cases are different, that meddling in Iran was doomed to failure, right? So that's why it's a worthy project ethically and perhaps strategically, and especially when you add in the fact that Iran was on the cusp of producing nuclear weapons, and we've obviously been negotiating them back from the brink for many, many years. I'd never imagined those negotiations could have taken place in good faith on the Iranian side. I was never supportive of Obama's efforts or Biden's efforts to negotiate all that. I just think the jihadism plus nuclear weapons is always a deal breaker, and this was and is a proper jihadist regime, which is to say that the people running Iran.
As always, if you haven't listened to or watched Sam Harris talk about how bad jihadism is for the last, basically since September 11th, you should. He's been warning us about it for a very long time. And to say that jihadists getting nuclear weapons is a bad thing is a understatement, the biggest understatement in the whole world. Let's continue.
Really are a death cult of the sort that we see in other groups like Hamas or Al Qaeda or the Islamic State. Granted, there are differences among those groups, but they're united in their sincere belief in martyrdom and paradise and in this cosmic war they're fighting against infidels and apostates and Jews and blasphemers, etc. So I think we're at war with jihadists at all times and everywhere, at least potentially. And I think we should disrupt jihadist projects wherever we can. So that's the reason why I would at least generically be in favor of regime change in Iran. Again, it didn't have to happen this month. I don't know why it happened when it did. But I also share the misgivings of many people, the misgivings that many people have about this war, not because I think it's ethically or politically or otherwise illegitimate to have intruded into this country, but because we are being led by some of the most incompetent and corrupt and amoral people who have ever been in public life in America.
No matter how sane and controlled Sam Harris sounds, he's always going to talk about his boy Donald Trump.
Now, so these are just cartoon characters and grifters and social media stars and moral lunatics in the second Trump administration. They inspire no confidence whatsoever from Trump on down. And whenever they start talking about why we're in Iran and why we're doing what we're doing on this front and more or less every other, they what you get is just a tissue of self-contradiction and malapropism and confusion, right? And occasionally something that sounds rational, and then you can seize on that and say, okay, that's the real reason we're doing what we're doing. And then that just gets obviated the next moment by the next dumb thing Trump says. So we're in bad hands, and that doesn't mean this project will fail. I mean, I will not. I certainly hope it succeeds. I hope there really is a regime change and the Iranian people get the society they deserve. And if that comes about, I'll certainly praise Trump for having accomplished that. But I think it's totally reasonably worried that we are going to make turn this into some sort of ghastly failure and perhaps failed state. I mean, that's possible, and that's certainly worth worrying about.
I think a lot of people are focused on a point you mentioned in passing, which is that we don't really understand the timing of this decision. There's an intuition that wars should be triggered by something that could have that makes this moment especially rational. Like, say, Iran, hypothetically, if they tried to attack the US mainland, that would make sense as a trigger to a war, or any number of other things, whereas the timing seems random. But I think, if you zoom out and, I share your like broadly consequentialist philosophy. I'm a big fan of your book, The Moral Landscape. And, if you think from a consequentialist perspective about war in general, the fact that there's no, it might not make sense to wait for an event to trigger a war with Iran, especially when you think about the nuclear end of it. So I debated Dave Smith a few months ago, for instance. Dave Smith and a lot of people.
That's yeoman's work. That's,
yeah. A lot of people.
I admire you for agreeing to do that under whatever conditions. I mean, that's
Yeah. But a lot of people in his orbit, and I think a lot of well-intentioned people who follow him and others like Glenn Greenwald and stuff, they believe that it's not rational to go to war with Iran until Iran is sprinting towards the bomb. In other words, that we the IAEA, basically the entire responsible world agrees. Which makes it unlike Iraq. Obviously, there were lots of suspicion and false confidence when it came to Saddam's nuclear program. There's actually earned confidence when it comes to Iran's nuclear program. They've admitted they've enriched uranium to 60%, and there's no other reason why you do that other than to create a bomb. But there's still this sense that we've got to wait till they actually send the signal to make the final 10-yard. I don't know. This is a very powerful intuition for people. I don't share it. I think it would be ridiculous to wait until that point.
I mean, we're under no obligation to give jihadists the benefit of the doubt ever, right? I mean, because there is no doubt as to their ultimate aims. I mean, Iran is ruled by, again, I'm not talking about the Iranian people. I'm talking about the Islamic Republic, the regime of jihadists ruling the country. They're ruled by a death cult that has the explicit project of genocide with respect to Israel. I mean, and if they could only accomplish it, genocide with respect to America. I mean, death to Israel, death to America.
The problem with that statement, Sam, is that there are some people who want the genocide of Israel and the Jews. So that's why they are in support of terrorism and terrorists and jihadists and death cult. And we've seen this moral confusion since October 7th. And now it's playing out in a different space where the Iranian people are the ones being oppressed and people still don't give a shit because it might benefit the Jews if the Iranian people are free. So it becomes a morally backwards. Anyways,
what they've been chanting, these slogans they've been chanting for, again, nearly 50 years. Let us take these people at their word, right? I mean, all you have to know is how they fought their war against Iraq to know how crazy this regime is. I mean, they sent children by the tens of thousands across minefields to clear that with keys around their necks that would grant them access to paradise, to clear the mines and to get ground up under Iraqi tanks, right? I mean, this has nothing to do with Israel or Jews or anyone else in principle. This has to do with an utterly pernicious and yet heartfelt belief system about the moral structure of this universe. I'm talking about the true believers here. I'm not talking about people who would pay lip service to things they don't believe. I'm talking about a quorum of people who are quite ready to die, right? And this makes a total mockery of any notion of deterrence, nuclear or otherwise. You can't deter suicide bombers. And suicide bombers with nuclear weapons are totally unacceptable. I mean, we can't get to a position where we're wondering whether or not jihadists are weeks away from acquiring bombs that then we can't locate, right? And again, this is not. I'll grant you, and I'll grant critics of everything I've just said that are narrowly framed. Our interests are not identical to Israel's. I mean, Iran really is an existential threat for Israel. When Iran says that they're going to annihilate the Jewish state and they're on the verge of getting a nuclear weapon to do that, you connect those dots. People in Tel Aviv are right to worry that they may all die in a sea of fire, right? I mean, that is just in fact the situation they're in. That's not the situation most Americans are in.
Literally today, a rocket, missile, whatever you want to call it, hit the street that my first cousin lives on in Israel. And that's scary. Very, very scary.
It's true that Iran could perpetrate an act of nuclear terrorism against us, right? I mean, they could smuggle a Hiroshima-sized device at some point into the States and blow it up in a major city. I mean, that's totally conceivable, and that would be awful and be the worst thing we've ever experienced. It would be much worse than 9/11 or anything else that has deranged us for decades at a stretch, right? So it's worth preventing at almost any cost, but it's not existential, right? So there is a difference between Israel and America here. But generally speaking, I think all open societies, not just Western societies, just all liberal open societies, have to be united against this possibility, which is in fact an inevitability if we don't do something about it, that a jihadist regime will acquire nuclear weapons. It's just we cannot let ourselves stumble into that situation. And above all, I think the Muslim world needs to understand that we can't let this come to pass. And I think many Muslim countries probably do. Whether they'll express it or not, they do agree with this point that Iran having the bomb is different from Israel or any other country having the bomb because of jihadism.
Yeah. I'm sometimes asked by people, including by Jews, why I have defended Israel. And the answer I give, and I really believe this, is that it's important to protect the good places in the world. Like if we go back, some of us don't have to go back very far in our family trees to find poor, struggling people leaving desperate places that are hopeless and coming basically to the West, basically to America, Canada, Western Europe, Australia, a few other countries that have sort of figured out a formula for human well-being that is the best one we have thus far discovered. And I think we have an obligation to protect those places, and I consider Israel such a place, and to minimize the influence of ideologies like communism and Islamism that have reliably produced pretty terrible societies to live in. To me, it's that simple.
Yeah.
Although, I with so much propaganda going around, it's actually hard to convince a skeptic that Israel is one of those places. Mm-hmm, like the difference between Israel and Iran is akin to the difference between North Korea and South Korea, or I should say South Korea and North Korea.
Right.
How do you convince a skeptic that Israel is the kind of place that is worth defending relative to its enemies?
Well, in many cases, I don't know that you can. I mean, is there anything you can say to Dave Smith to get his head screwed on straight? I don't think so at this point. I mean, it's not an unawareness of facts is unlikely to be his problem. There's something else going on there. I don't know what that is, but
Registration is now open for the region's largest design and contract manufacturing.
So I think it's worth admitting that in many cases it's a hopeless project. In other cases, the first thing to point out is that people have been the victim of really a kind of a psyop, right? I mean, there's just been a deluge of misinformation and disinformation, half truths and lies and exaggerations, and it's all aimed in one direction, and the asymmetry of it. I mean, just I guess it could be anticipated just by dint of numbers. I mean, there's only 15 million Jews on Earth, and there are 2 billion Muslims. So what do you expect TikTok to look like in the aftermath of October 7th? But I think it's more than that, right? There's also anti-Semitism that has been engineered and weaponized in ways that we could talk about. There's also whatever the algorithms have done or been led to do for whatever reason. But the bias is extraordinary, and the level of deception is extraordinary, right? So, we have people walking around with facts in their heads that are not facts, right? There are people who think that Israel has perpetrated a genocide in Gaza, right? And they think they're using the word genocide correctly, right? So they think the Israelis are in fact the new Nazis, right? So that something in Gaza is akin to what happened in a death camp like Treblinka, right? I mean, that's what they think is real. They think there was a famine in Gaza, right? They think that the Israelis stopped food shipments to such a degree that you got people dying of starvation in Gaza, right? They believe they've seen pictures of this, right? They've seen pictures from the Syrian civil war that they thought were depicted suffering and death in Gaza, right? So I'm not saying there hasn't been tremendous suffering and death in Gaza, but if in fact it is true that the IDF faced a challenge, an urban warfare challenge of a sort that no society has ever faced, and they met that challenge at least as scrupulously, if not more scrupulously, than we ever fought jihadists in any.
Yes, was not a genocide in Gaza. That's been debunked by experts, one including John Spencer. So I would encourage you to look up his work and what he has said about that, and the lengths that Israel went to minimize civilian casualties in a very chaotic environment meant to cause chaos and disruption.
Anything like an analogous urban warfare set in any of our wars, right? If in fact of course, collateral damage is going to happen, and of course, even some isolated war crimes will happen. I would expect both of those things to happen in any war. But if it is in fact true that the IDF has been better behaved, or at least as well behaved as Americans or Brits or any other Western power has been in anything like an analogous situation, admitting that there really has been no analogous situation. We're talking about a society that used its own civilians as human shields and kept hundreds of hostages in tunnels. If all that's true, then what are we talking about here? What is this double standard that's being applied to Israel, right? And to get out of the identity politics of it all, and to dissect out the seemingly relevant variable of Judaism and the Jewish state, which is in fact not relevant at all from my point of view, I would just say that if an analogous thing had happened in Western Europe, I mean, if Denmark had a similar atrocity perpetrated against it, right? If some jihadist death cult had murdered 1,200 Danes and taken 250 hostage, right? Everything I've said in the aftermath of October 7th, I would have said you'd be a modulo the changes to applying to Denmark, right? Just the Danes should have done exactly what the IDF did, I mean, that's the standard I judge all of this by, right? This is not there's no special concern about Israel because it's a Jewish state from my point of view. I'm talking about open societies and their enemies. And the worst enemies of open societies in our lifetime.
He's talking about good versus evil. I mean, that's the idea. It's good versus evil. And some people are so confused and bankrupt in their values that they don't know what's good and what's evil, what's right and what's wrong.
Are jihadists. They're not the only enemies, but I think they're the worst. And Israel really is that because of where it is the tip of the spear for this conflict. And that's why we should be a loyal ally of this country, right? I mean, what's in our, how is it in the American interest to support Israel? It's in the interest of every open society to win a civilizational war against jihadism, right? That full stop. That explains everything from my point of view. It's not that there's not more we could talk about, but that's enough. And anyone who's fundamentally critical of everything that's happened here, who on October 8th was chanting in support of the Palestinian cause before Israel had done anything in response, all of those people are at best confused about this morally and politically, and at worst, many of them simply support jihadists.
I've seen plenty of power banks over my 15 years of reviewing tech, but this Ridge one quickly became a favorite.
So this?
Okay, I want to talk about anti-Semitism in America. This is a topic where I've had two directly contradictory impulses. One is the impulse to resist moral panics about bigotry in general. As you know, most of the writing and speaking I've done related to the moral panic about white supremacy and racism and the myth that the cops it was open season on unarmed Black people and all the bad policies, including terrible policies for Black people that people endorsed as a result of this very compelling myth, this very emotionally compelling myth. And so I think I've developed a very finely tuned sense that, if someone's being accused of racism, you should take a deep breath and actually see if that's what they're doing, or if, as you know, you've been accused of being a racist for saying some of the things that I've said and some of the things that actually a lot of Black people would agree with. And so I'm very sensitive to this happening with the charge of anti-Semitism as well. If someone is criticizing Israel, saying, "Oh, I'm an anti-Zionist, Israel's an apartheid state, I've been listening to Dave Smith and Glenn Greenwald, and it seems like, what's going on over there is really messed up, and it sort of reminds me of South Africa, and the Palestinians are being oppressed." Well, I'm not going to jump to call that person an anti-Semite necessarily, unless I hear them saying nasty things about Jews qua Jews. And this is also influenced, I think, by that I was recently on one of the worst campuses in terms of deranged hatred of Israel, Columbia University. And this is obviously, I graduated in 2020, 6 years ago now. But it was equally bad then as it is now. It's just that there was no major war to bring it to the surface. But every year, there was an anti-Zionist protest that had like over 100 people. The anti-Zionists, they would knock on all of our dorm rooms, go door to door, handing us misinformation about Israel. And then there was like 10 Jewish kids from the pro-Israel group, like sort of meekly, like trying to counter protest. And they're outnumbered 10-1. But in all the things I would hear people say casually about Israel, I would never hear those same kids say something nasty about Jews,
Right.
And so my sense was that and I've heard you say this as well on one of your recent podcasts, is that for them, the way they arrive at their obsession with hating Israel is because they view Jews as a special case of white people. And they're really at root, what they hate is whiteness and Western values. And so that's not quite the same as an anti-Black bigot who actually...
I mean, I agree with Coleman in a sense. Like, I don't like to use the word anti-Semite or Jew hater loosely. I don't think it should be used loosely, just like the term Nazi or racist shouldn't be used loosely. We watched the video earlier in this stream from Piers Morgan and Megyn Kelly, and many people have called them anti-Semites. And I honestly do not think they are. I don't think Megyn Kelly is, certainly do not. I just think she goes wherever she thinks she's going to get the most views. That's what she does. She doesn't hate Jews, certainly does not. I don't think that is true. And I think people calling Megyn Kelly an anti-Semite are wrong, and they're watering down the term where it's earned, like people like Carlson and Candace Owens and things of that nature. Megyn Kelly just goes where the views are. And I don't think Piers Morgan is either. I think he also goes where the views are. But, you know, my buddy Jake Donnelly might have a different opinion on that because he was actually on the Piers Morgan show. So different people can have different opinions on that, but I still don't think that we should throw out the term so loosely. People really need to earn it so that term actually holds weight and value. And so I agree with Coleman Hughes in that regard. Let's continue.
Just has a disgust reaction when he or she thinks about or sees black people. So all that is context for the question: how do you distinguish anti-Zionism from anti-Semitism, and to what extent do you think there should be a big focus on fighting anti-Semitism, given that it is a real thing?
Well, I would admit that you can logically differentiate anti-Semitism from anti-Zionism. I mean, I think that those are distinct, at least in principle, but in practice, I think most people who are anti-Zionist are in fact anti-Semitic. And I think that the unique focus, the special focus on Israel as a country that has a problem in justifying its right to exist, the only way I can explain that is at some level anti-Semitism, globally speaking. I don't know how else to explain the focus on Israel at this point. I mean, there's something like 195 countries on Earth. I think about 2/3 of them were formed. Their boundaries were formed by map makers just drawing those boundaries on a map without much regard for the lives of the people living within those boundaries. Which is to say that there's just something like 2/3 of existing countries have a similar origin story to Israel's, right? It's just there's a mess on the ground, and in the aftermath of wars, people just divided up the map. Only Israel is constantly put into question, right? And it has to justify its existence when its neighbors are actually trying to murder its inhabitants, right? It's like it's not a normal situation. I mean, they're threatened. They continually are attacked, and they win wars, and then the world demands that they give back the strategically valuable land they got after they won those wars. Defensive wars, purely defensive wars. I don't know where else this has happened in human history. I mean, it should strike us as astonishing that the UN and the Human Rights Commission have passed more resolutions against Israel than against all other countries combined, right? And those countries include countries that have perpetrated actual genocides. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're talking about countries like Sudan and Syria and Yemen and Iran and North Korea. I mean, just like the worst actors on you add them all together, and they have not had enough opprobrium heaped on them to equal what Israel has attracted on the world stage, right? So how do you explain that? I don't have an explanation beyond some weird fixation on the country because of its character as the Jewish state, right? And yes, you can be an anti-Zionist. You can be fundamentally critical of this whole project. You could think, the Jews don't need a state, don't deserve a state, don't require a state. They can just live wherever they live, like the Roma do. Or I mean, like there'd be some way to do a tightrope walk through all that and still come out not saying anything bad against the Jews as Jews, but practically speaking, most people who are really concerned about the existence of Israel, I think, are probably also anti-Semitic.
there's a contract most retail traders have never heard of. It's called XSP.
Thanks, man. Don't care. Back to this.
I've been genuinely surprised by the degree to which anti-Semitic obsession has flowered on the far right. I genuinely wouldn't have predicted it 2 or 3 years ago. It's maybe it's a failure of me updating my model of right-wing psychology, but it's like I was genuinely surprised, for instance, that when Charlie Kirk was killed, that very same day, you see viral tweets instantly blaming Israel that couldn't possibly have had evidence because it had just happened, right? From like total moron, like just people on the internet, right? And that
people have, Israel derangement syndrome. They certainly do. Like, there's no way around it. Again, he gave the October 8th example. October 7th happens, then October 8th, people are saying free Palestine. No retaliation, nothing, just pure hatred for Israel and downstream from that, Jews. Same thing. Well, if something bad happens in the world, no matter what it is, we'll blame the Jews because that's an easy scapegoat for everything. And it's ridiculous. It's getting actually out of hand at this point.
But then Candace Owens,
but then that would filter even to people who I had some degree of respect for, like Megyn Kelly would be just asking questions about the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and that almost uniquely Ben Shapiro would be like the last major conservative broadcaster to just not entertain any of this BS, especially when it seemed obvious pretty immediately after that he was killed by someone who probably had left-wing views and hated him for what he perceived as like right-wing bigotry. Seems like a lot of the right is just driving right past very simple explanations for phenomena and going straight to anti-Semitism. Again, the Iran war is another example. President Trump has said he believes Iran tried to kill him. Now, put aside where the state of the evidence actually is on those claims right now, I think it's kind of murky. I wouldn't have trouble believing it, but I don't think it's like a rock solid capital F fact yet. But Trump has said he believes that. We know how famously vindictive he is, right? That itself would be a parsimonious explanation for his aggressive posture towards Iran. But people drive right past that on the freeway and go right to the stop where Bibi's controlling him.
He's been saying that we should do something against Iran since I think 1980. Right? I mean,
Right.
So he's an old guy and he remembers 1979. Right? He remembers Jimmy Carter pathetically, speaking from the Oval Office, helplessly talking about our.
Yeah, that's why it's always so funny that people say now that Israel drove Trump into the war, even though Trump has been saying this, again, like Sam said, since 1980. So he's been pretty sort of consistent on the way he views Iran, but still, Israel is dog walking Trump into this war. It's like, you people are you're just insane at this point.
Hostage crisis day after day after day. And, just what on some level, what a national humiliation that was, right? So from his point of view, we should have kicked the shit out of Iran a long time ago. I mean, I can only imagine that's his default. I think he spoke out against, Obama's nuclear deal from the very beginning. I think the anti-Semitism problem on the right is not surprising. I mean, anti-Semitism has always been a problem right of center, and William F. Buckley and other gatekeepers on the right have kept it at bay for many decades. And now that we live in some sort of Hunger Games like dystopia online, all the guardrails are gone, and now we're just seeing what people think and believe and want to talk about. But in addition to that, we're seeing an appetite for conspiracism, conspiracy theories that is seems unslakable right of center. I mean, there's some conspiracy thinking left of center too, but on the right, it is one of the most pervasive features of the culture. And anti-Semitism is like the Ur conspiracy theory, right? It is one of the most well subscribed strands of virtually any conspiratorial style of accounting for world events.
And our friends Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson are fucking leading the way. They're leading the charge in the most despicable manner. Let's continue.
It's just just the most obvious attractor on that landscape. So almost everything winds up coming back to the Jews at some point, if you are a conspiracist. Not always, but so often that it's just, again, this is unsurprising. But what is surprising is just how many seemingly normal people have so much time for conspiracy thinking. Right? I mean, just the independent media space has been an engine of conspiracism. I mean, look at Joe Rogan's podcast alone has it's been like a it's brought conspiracism back into the public conversation on almost every point in a way that, I mean, it's almost impossible to exaggerate, and that's just one podcast. But then you add to that the truly crazy permutations that come from people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, and it's what the right is doing now with its collective mind, and that doesn't go well for the Jews.
It's so easy to become a podcaster with Riverside. First, go to Riverside and open an account.
Listen, I use Riverside. I have a podcast. My podcast is called Something for Everybody on all major podcast platforms. So check it out. Let's continue. Here we go. Coleman Hughes.
I think it's just a feature of human psychology that we prefer the structure of conspiracy theories to the way that problems actually play out. So if you open up any Hollywood screenwriting book, it's basically going to tell you that you should write a conspiracy plot and then have a hero uncover it. And that's not something Hollywood invented. That's something Hollywood discovered. It discovered that stories which have that structure do better. And I think people look for stories of that structure in the news. And it's also possible that more and more I think Tyler Cowen made this point somewhere, that we are becoming less of a literate culture and more of a oral culture. Not meaning that people can't read. Obviously, people can read, but most people are just not reading the news anymore. They're not reading the newspaper. They're and that actually changes how you interact with information. It makes charisma more important and logic less important, I think. And I don't think anyone's immune from this.
The way you produce this content, I mean, think about how these documents get made. I mean, if someone is taking the time to write an article for the Atlantic that has been deeply researched, that's one sort of way to produce propositional claims of knowledge about the world. If somebody's just shooting the shit on a podcast, I mean, even the two of us talking now is looser than a written document. But Dave Smith over on Joe Rogan's podcast, I mean, that's just it's just tennis without the net, right? And so someone who's just speculating, so just creating a vibe with words, just saying maybe it's like this, right, in front of 20 million people. If that's your news diet, right, you're going to be reliably misinformed.
Yeah. This is all of these concerns are why I had Michael Tracy on my podcast recently to talk about Epstein and related conspiracies, because on his Substack, he's been doing the hard work of like writing down everything we know as a fact and distinguishing that from just conjecture and vibes. And when you pair out everything that isn't a confirmed fact and keep it to what we actually know and do the work and track down the footnotes of the footnotes of the footnotes, it becomes much more, in my view, a story of one man's depravity than a story of a story that really should interest the public. That's at least how I feel about it. How do you feel about that story?
Well, I don't think I've looked into it as deeply as you have. Certainly not as deeply as Tracy has. I've read and seen some of what he's produced. I worry a little bit about him and his focus on this. I mean, again, I don't. This is slightly unfair to say, and is slightly ad hominem, but I feel like my spidey sense is going off a little bit around, his deep dive down this particular rabbit hole. There's a reason why I haven't invited him on my podcast to have that conversation. But again, I could be wrong about all that. I think I do share his sense, and I think your sense, that there's a bit of a moral panic around this. But I also, at this point, think we should just see all the evidence, right? I mean, normally I wouldn't be in favor of just airing, vetted emails and pictures and documents to online to millions of people, to just let the public make of it what it will. But given how we got here, given the level of betrayal by our institutions and the level of distrust in our institutions, now well-earned distrust, I think that the only remedy is sunlight. So I would be in favor of just revealing everything as unredacted a way as possible. And I think the suspicion that the Trump administration has something to hide is probably warranted at this point, because these guys are inveterate liars on every other point, right? They're just this is the most dishonest group of people we've ever assembled in a government. So there's no reason to trust anything that comes out of Trump's mouth or J.D. Vance's mouth or Pam Bondi's mouth or Cash. But I mean, this is just, to call them liars doesn't even quite get at what it's like to hear them message on any topic. It's not that they sometimes lie or lie when they need to. They lie always and everywhere, and even when it doesn't serve their interest, right? I mean, it's like they're malfunctioning robots on some level. I mean, it's just like the mendacity knob got turned to 11 and it just got stuck there. I have no idea what these people, why they even lie the way they lie. But that's all.
I've known a couple of people in my life who just they can't help themselves, right? And so there are certain people, I don't know Trump and J.D. Vance, I don't know all these people personally. Sam Harris obviously thinks he knows them very well and can kind of tell what they're doing. I'm not really talking about that. I'm just talking about people in general. It's like I've known people who are just compulsive liars. Like, even when they don't need to, and even when it would be better if they told the truth, they still lie. And I don't even think they're thinking about it. They're just like, they've convoluted or made up all of these stories in their brain, and their only way forward is to think about what they told this person and that person. Did they tell them this, or did they tell them that? And then something just comes out of their mouth, and it's a lie because they can't keep all the stories in their mouth straight. And so that's just like becomes like an unconscious habit that they do, and that's what Ooh, just moved my camera a little bit. Let's see if oh no, moved it too much. Oh well. Doesn't matter. Kicked my camera. Anyways, it's all right. That's why I'm on the little screen so you can't see it. So boom. Anyways, what was I saying? Got totally distracted by the fact that I kicked my camera. Anyways, yeah. So just if you're a compulsive liar, just like it's an unconscious habit at that point. You don't even know what the fuck you're doing.
It's all to say that, yeah, let's see what's in the files, and maybe
I'm of two minds about that, because when I saw someone like Larry Summers' emails coming out with where he was he's talking about, actually, strangely, I had the woman he was talking about as a guest on my podcast a couple of years ago by coincidence, but he's basically just asking for advice about how to pursue this younger woman who is in her 20s, and like, do we need should the government be releasing and embarrassing and at the height of basically a witch hunt of these people that are not even within miles of being accused of a crime? I mean, that seems like a big price to pay for releasing files that I doubt will actually ever satisfy the crazies.
You, just you, building your app on base 44. Describe it.
Shit.
And it's real.
Distracted.
One thought.
Distracted.
Yeah, no, I totally agree that this is not a it's not fair and it's not good. I just think I'm just wondering what the path back to normalcy is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to release pages where every word has been blacked out, and to expose everything about Bill Clinton and nothing about Donald Trump. I mean, clearly this is not how we can play the game at this moment. So, I wouldn't know what to do. If I could go walk back in time, I would say a more judicious process is what is the right one. But given that we're here, I mean, I showed up in those files, right? And
right.
Some of that communication I think was misunderstood by some people. I mean, I found it just frankly funny, how I was in there. But and then there's some other person named Sam Harris in there too. There's a woman named Sam Harris in there who I think was buying Epstein shoes, and so the people thought I was buying Epstein shoes, and that was that was funny. But so and in any case, it's not good that we're here. And it's not good that we have a culture that is as defined as it is by conspiracy loons. I mean, this is like the Pizzagatification of our entire society, right? Most of the people who have contributed to this discourse are people we should never consult again on any topic. I mean, they're like, how is Kash Patel running the FBI, right? How is he even a person whose name I know? It's madness, right? Jack Posobiec. Why is this a guy who's right of center of influence in any way, right? I mean, this guy gave us Pizzagate, right? This is just not, and yet this is, this is Alex Jones's world, and we're just living in it, right? And yet it's you have to figure out how to find a path back to the adults in the room, identifying them, promoting them, getting them, to be in charge once again. And I don't know how to do that on this particular case, given the level of mistrust, but apart from attempting to slake the thirst of all the crazies who think that this is the biggest story of the decade, right? So let's just open all the files and see what's there. I do worry that Michael Tracy, that there might be more there that should be prosecuted and that is worth being shocked by, right? I mean, it could be that there's the word trafficking here means more than Epstein and Maxwell were just trafficking to Epstein, and maybe Prince Andrew and maybe one or two other people. Maybe there are a lot of people who should go to jail. I don't actually know. I mean, it remains to be seen. But it's possible that there are a lot of guys who had sex with girls they knew.
I mean, there needs to be a serious investigation, and anyone who did heinous, horrible behavior needs to be thrown in prison and held accountable. And if, that's a fact of the matter.
To be underage on Epstein's island, or it's possible that he was the only person who ever did anything like that, and even his crimes have been exaggerated. I just don't know what's true.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's shift topic a little bit. I'm curious what you think, and Jonathan Haidt, does a lot of work on this, about age restricting social media, banning various parts of social media. What do you have like a strong position on that topic, and on the wider question of what social media is doing to mental health and well-being?
Well, I at this point see no reason to doubt that it's a problem, more or less of the shape and depth that Haidt claims, right? I mean, I think social media has done something I mean, it's done many things, but most of them were bad to our culture in the last 15 some odd years.
Well, your boy Gary Vaynerchuk, if you know him, maybe you don't, maybe Sam doesn't. Nah, yeah, people know him. Gary Vaynerchuk. Anyways, that was a weird thing to say. If you don't know him, doesn't matter. I'm not talking to anyone but myself here. Gary Vaynerchuk says that social media is dead. It is now interest media. I think it's just the attention economy. The more outrageous shit you do, the more conspiracy theories you push, the more you talk about the Jews and this and that, and the more you get clickbait and outrage and all this type of stuff, kind of like Megyn Kelly and Piers Morgan, which we talked about earlier, the more views you're going to get, the more attention you get. And that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. And it shouldn't be. That's why I really like listening to Sam Harris and Coleman Hughes, because they put out real stuff and it's moral and it's ethical and it's on target. And they seem to believe that it's true. Piers Morgan and Megyn Kelly don't seem to know what they think is true. They're just putting out stuff because they know it's going to get views. And then you have Candace and Tucker, who are just out of their fucking minds.
I mean, I can speak personally about the effects of deleting my Twitter account, and that was, I'm always embarrassed to say this, but it's the greatest life hack I've discovered in the last quarter century. Right? I mean, it's just unbelievable improvement in my day-to-day well-being by deleting my Twitter account. Now, granted, I'm not a general case, right? I was a public-facing person who had a fairly large following on Twitter, and I'm a controversial public figure who is getting a lot of hate from both the left and the right, and so it's probably not a surprise that when I pull the plug on all that and then just live my life in the real world, there's a lot of relief to be found. But it is more than that. It's just, even when social media was a source of apparent pleasure, and I was using it, to my advantage, the fragmentation of my life. I mean, just the checking of it, just the dopaminergic, invitation, hour by hour. If whether I checked it 10 times or 20 times or 100 times, if things were really happening. In retrospect, I think virtually all of that time was misspent, right? And the effect on my other moments in life was on balance negative. So this is obviously my use case is completely different from a teenager's. A teenage girl on Instagram has a different set of problems on social media than I ever had. But I think, on balance, a lot of that has to be bad. And so I do think that Haidt is probably right about this being a kind of emergency for teens. And, Annika and I have kept our daughters off social media in any kind of public-facing way until the last minute. And, I think our oldest daughter has accounts that are, private with her friends, but still, I mean, our kind of rolling out the leash on all that has been careful, because we are just sensitive to the prospects of this just being a really unhappy influence on a young mind, right? I mean, suddenly.
I mean, at this very moment that I'm streaming this live, my son is about a week. It's about 6 months and a week old. And so in 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years, I'm going to be very surprised where social media is, where interest media is, where just media is in general, and what sort of obstacles, me, my wife, and my son have to deal with in terms of that and young people and technology. Because again, right now he's 6 months and 1 week old. It's a beautiful time. He's healthy. My wife is healthy. It's a fucking miracle. But there will be different obstacles and things that we go through that people now are trying to figure out that we'll go through in 10, 15, 20 years based on technology and stuff. But it'll be interesting to see when he gets into like middle school, what we're dealing with. So I think about that often.
To feel that your personhood in some important sense exists online, and has to be managed there. And I mean, it's inevitable to some degree, but we should allow our kids to migrate their lives onto that digital landscape. It should be, this process should be very carefully thought out and circumspect, because the way it can go wrong is just so obvious.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast a couple months ago. It was Haviv Rettigor's podcast where he was interviewing a former Al-Qaeda spy. This was I don't know if you caught this. He was an Al-Qaeda member who flipped. It's a really good podcast.
Haviv is great. I'm a huge Haviv fan. Yeah.
He's the man. But this guy was making the argument that I'm translating it into my own conceptual terms, that we kind of overly fetishize democracy in the West because it's worked very well for us. But if you look at the Middle East, virtually all the places that are sort of stable and going in the direction broadly of our values are the monarchies, not the democracies. The democracies generally turn out to be failed states or civil conflicts or Islamist states. And I thought that was a provocative, but I think very interesting argument. Where do you actually place democracy as a political system in your set of priorities for encouraging other countries in terms of our foreign policy?
Dude, enough with the commercials, dude. Come on.
Online is a vast.
It's like I'm watching WWE on Netflix.
Yeah, I don't think democracy itself is an intrinsic good. So yeah, I think I would take instruction from that former jihadist on this point. I mean, it's totally plausible to me that there are societies that are not ready for democracy, and that some kind of benevolent dictatorship might be the path to democracy for them. But what you need is you need cultural change sufficient for most people to want to live in a way that makes democracy viable, right? And a path to human flourishing, right? So if you're just going to just give everyone the right to vote because voting is some kind of sacred right that supersedes all others, well, you might run that experiment once in a society that will vote in the theocrats, right? And then it's over. So that there's nothing to be recommended about that project. So it's I do think you want people who are ready for something like secularism and something like liberalism, right? Before you can be confident that whether it's a democracy or anything else is going to matter, right? I mean, like what's the majority going to want to do? Are they just going to want to stifle the free speech of everyone, including themselves? Are they going to want to hang people for blasphemy? I mean, like, it's just, if the majority is sufficiently crazy, well, then it almost doesn't matter, right? Then you want some authoritarian, albeit a benevolent one, to say, no, sorry, we're not going to hang people for blasphemy. You don't get a vote on that. And so I would agree that just empirically, what we're seeing in the Middle East is that these closed societies, these authoritarian, really even despotic societies like Saudi and the UAE, are the ones that are both reining in their religious fanatics to a degree at this moment, and taking obvious steps toward some version of secularism and integration with modernity. And the so-called Arab street, when left to its own devices, seems to want to kill people like Salman Rushdie, right? It's just, I mean, that's, if you can get the mob together and ask it what it wants, it's not going to sound like what they want in Marin County or any other place that many left of center secularists would find recognizable.
How worried are you about declining birth rates all around the world? Obviously, this is a much talked about phenomenon. We are below replacement level meaning, you know,
it's nice. Coleman Hughes is going basically everywhere, all the major topics with Sam Harris here.
Left to our own devices, our population is shrinking everywhere from America to basically every country in Europe, basically everywhere in the developed world outside of Israel, which has a real culture of having big families and feeling a sort of responsibility to bring about a new generation. Everywhere except Israel, basically, we're shrinking, and this creates economic problems, first of all. But how do you think this is a problem? If so, how big a problem is it, and how should we think about mitigating it?
Well, I can well imagine it's a problem. It's not a problem I've thought much about. I mean, this is certainly an argument for at least hoping for robots that we can rely on in our old age to care for us, right? I mean, this is, if the human experiment is at bottom a kind of Ponzi scheme that requires more and more people always at the bottom, in the limit, it obviously doesn't. It can't work, right? I mean, we can't get to. I think the carrying capacity of the Earth, or at least the last time I heard anyone estimate what the carrying capacity of the Earth was something like 40 billion people, right? So we can't get to 60 billion people, presumably, just because everyone on Social Security needs 2.1 people beneath them to take care of them, right? So technology is going to have to come to our rescue on some level, or there's going to have to be some path to population decline that is more benign than others, right? I mean, obviously, having it get cut in half in a generation has got to be dystopian, but I don't know what I don't know what is to be hoped for here. I mean, in the limit, the arithmetic just doesn't work out, right? Or we have to go, fly away to other planets. Right. So I just have to think that ultimately technology is going to come to our rescue here.
I think I'm trying to, if I put together my model of Sam Harris based on having followed you for a long time on many different topics, from Islam to AI to, to any number of issues, it seems like you, more than other public intellectuals and authors I follow, focus on the 1% chance that something will go very wrong, and that you allocate like a much larger percentage of your intellectual energy towards preventing. Pandemics would be another example. To the worst case scenario, to preparing for the worst case scenario, than most people who do this kind of work. Do you think that's accurate as a perception? And do you think that does that come from like a philosophical concern, or is it personality?
This is the world's smartest wallet. Watch this.
Kind of cool. Anyways, about 10 minutes left of this video.
I guess I would dispute the allegation. Because just take jihadism, say. I don't think it's a 1% chance that things are going to go very wrong there. I think it's a 100% chance that things have already gone wrong, and they will keep going wrong and until we get a handle on it. I mean, it's just a guaranteed. It's guaranteed to be a problem, and it's an asymmetric problem, right? So it's just so easy to do something sufficiently terrible that it deranges a society for a year, 5, 10, right? A bunch of guys with box cutters got us to spend trillions of dollars fighting wars. You might think those wars were misbegotten, and at least one of them probably was, but still, right? It's like the amount of leverage you get for being a suicidal maniac, supported by lots of people who are just fans of suicidal maniacs. It's just so extraordinary that this is not a 1% problem. This is a 100% problem. So it is with pandemics. Just if we wait around long enough, we're going to have another pandemic that's worse than COVID. I would put the chances of that at 100%, right? So, and much worse than COVID. So, and to say nothing of engineered pandemics. If we just democratize the ability to engineer, pandemic, pandemically plausible viruses, I think the chance that some death cult is going to do that, whether it's a jihadist one or it's one like Om Shinrikyo or some other group of crazies, I think the chances of that happening are close to 100%. Right. So it's just these are not tail risks. These are just, you take any on a generational timeline. You just give me 30 years. Both of these things are going to happen. Right. So.
Well, let me just underscore that, because I remember I told this story on Joe Rogan years ago, but I haven't told it in a while, that when COVID first started and people were debating about whether it was lab leak or not, many people emphasized, well, they did this research in Wuhan in a BSL-3 lab, and that's like the security of that lab is super tight. I instinctively didn't believe that, because my then girlfriend, now fiance, had been working in a BSL-3 lab in Colombia, and she had she wanted to show it to me one time, like show me the research she was doing. So I just walked in, like we just walked in. I don't think I washed my hands. I don't think I had a mask on. So, which is just like, on paper, something is what it is, but it's only ever as secure.
Also, congratulations, Coleman. You're getting married. It's fucking awesome. Getting married is the best decision you're ever going to make. Hopefully you have kids. Having kids is fucking awesome. Cheers.
As the people working in it, which case was me.
And I was talking about intentional, weaponizing of lethal agents. But yeah, the inadvertent spread is also, again, given enough time, I think on the order of 100% likely to occur. So, the BSL-4 labs leak, right? So it's this is just an enduring problem worth worrying about. And when you look at what we spend our time and attention and resources on, there's just they're not apportioned in any rational way commensurate with these risks, right? I just think we should be much more focused on. There are even tail risks that I think we should be more focused on. But and I think with AI too, it's just, is the alignment problem a 1% risk? I don't know, but the people who are doing the work are rarely estimating it to be that low, right? It's like when you ask Sam Altman, what are the chances that AI ruins everything? I think he once gave an answer of like 20%, right? So it's not. Maybe he's down to 1% now.
That's not nothing. Like, that's a fucking lot.
But no one's lower than 1%, right? And if during the Manhattan Project, if you had asked the assembled scientists, what's the chance that your Trinity test is going to ruin everything? Just you ignite the atmosphere and all the nitrogen in the atmosphere and cancel life on Earth. They were debating the possibility of that. They put it in, I think, at the end, and it won in some millions. But they did several rounds of calculation to ensure themselves that there's no significant risk there. But what if at the end of all that calculation, they had said, yeah, we think it's probably a 1% risk or a 10% risk, or what if you had Edward Teller saying it was a 20% risk, and you had one outlier like the analogous person to Jan LeCun saying that there's no risk, but everyone else couldn't drive it even into single digits for the most part, and they still detonated the bomb at Alamogordo.
At Kinesis, we protect your savings with a passive income paid in gold
Get out of here, bro.
Just rolling the dice with the future. That would have been astonishing and astonishingly irresponsible. And yet that's where we seem to be with AI on the account of the people who are closest to this, to advancing the technology. So it's, again, I don't know what it is rational to believe about the alignment problem. I don't know if it is a 1% risk or a 90% risk, really. But so I don't. So yeah, I guess I'm disputing that the things that have captured my attention here are really the kind of tiny tail risks. I think they're.
I don't really know what Sam means when he says the alignment problem. I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit, but maybe you guys do. I have no idea what he means by that exactly. So,
yeah, I mean I spent a lot of time whinging about Trump, right, and the prospects of having him for a second term, and now
whinging. That's my favorite word. I love the word whinging. my wife is British, and whinging is like a British term, and we always we always ask our son when he's a little cranky why he's whinging. It's funny that Sam said it. Anyways.
Whatever, 14 months into a second term, what was the risk that he was going to do massive harm to the integrity of our society and its standing on the world stage? If I had estimated 100%, I don't think I would have been wrong, right? So it wasn't a 1% risk. All those hours spent worrying about Trump and his incompetence and his corruption and his aptitude for alienating our allies and giving comfort to our enemies. That seems to be how it's been playing out. And so I don't know what probability I would have put it at, but it would have been very high.
Okay, final question. You're a longtime resident of California, and Gavin Newsom seems, based on prediction markets, to be the best hope for the Democrats in 2028. What do you make of him as a politician and a candidate, and his record in California?
Well, I certainly hope it doesn't come to pass that we're running Newsom in 2028. I mean, leaving aside his qualities as a person or a politician, I mean, just take any liberal coming out of California, or anyone who's had to have a political life in California and had to pander to the leftist interests that you had to pander to in order to succeed as a politician in California. So whatever leftist pieties you're trailing in your wake to accomplish that candidate is going to have a hard time selling him or herself to the other 49 states, I think, in 2028. I just think the albatross of California hung around his neck, and its reputation, real and imagined, in the other 49 states is not good, right? So I just think it's the Oppo research and the negative ads sort of cut themselves, right? You just show a lot of footage of homeless encampments and fentanyl-addled addicts on the sidewalk in San Francisco and elsewhere, and fires, burning down half of Los Angeles, and California is a much better place to live than its critics imagine, but it's so easy to straw man the state, and there's so many real problems that, politically speaking, it just doesn't seem pragmatic to put forward a Californian. And so, and in addition to that, I think Newsom has some other strikes against him. He's also very talented in other ways and very telegenic, and he looks the part. And I think if I would imagine, in a debate against J.D. Vance, I think he probably would do well, right? But again, I do think the reputation of California for the rest of the country is an albatross that we just shouldn't, voluntarily put around our necks as Democrats.
Okay, Sam Harris, until next time, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, good to see you, Coleman.
All right, there we go. Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you, Sam Harris. Thank you, Coleman Hughes. I appreciate those guys very much. Coleman Hughes got a great podcast. I listen to Sam Harris quite a bit. And if you are looking for another podcast, check out mine. My podcast is really centered around mindset, mental health, and personal development. That's really where my expertise lies. I do these live streams to kind of learn in real time. So I don't give a ton of commentary because I am learning in real time. But if you are interested in mindset, mental health, and personal development, then definitely check out my podcast, which is called Something for Everybody, on all major podcast platforms. And wherever you're watching right now, please drop a like, drop a comment, drop a follow, or subscribe, whatever it is. But I appreciate you very much. Take good care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.